Wonderful. Welcome. This is going to be a really lively evening. I'm Rose Roby. I am Matt Ho's campaign manager. And as I'm sure you all know, Matt Ho is running for Senate, for U.S. Senate from North Carolina. And we have a special guest here tonight, and that is Howie Hawkins. Howie, I know you're out there. We can't hear you, but you are all giving it up for Howie Hawkins. So we're going to get started nice and on time here. And first, let me introduce you to Howie Hawkins, who I'm sure doesn't need any introduction, but we'll get one anyway. Howie Hawkins is a retired Teamster who has been active in movements for civil rights, peace, labor, and the environment since the 1960s. He was the Green Party nominee for president in 2020. He was the first U.S. candidate to campaign for a Green New Deal in 2010, running for governor of New York, for which he is the Green Party candidate again in 2022. And that is why we call him the original Green New Dealer. So let's all give it up for Howie Hawkins. Yeah. And Matthew Ho. Matthew Ho is the 2022 North Carolina Green Party candidate for U.S. Senate. In 2009, Matt resigned in protest from his post in Afghanistan with the State Department over the American escalation of the war. In 2010, Matt was named the Ridenhour Prize recipient for truth-telling. Matt's writings have appeared in online and print periodicals such as the Huffington Post, USA Today, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. He's been a guest on hundreds of news programs and on radio and television networks, including CBS, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, NPR, the BBC, and PBS. And so again, I know I can't see you or hear you, but I know you are out there giving it up for Matt Ho. And tonight, we're going to be discussing ranked choice voting and proportional representation. And that is something that is near and dear to Howie's heart. I know that. And it's near and dear to this campaign, which I think everybody knows went through quite a battle to get on the ballot. And while the Democrats showed up, not only called people, not only texted people, but showed up at people's doors saying, we can't allow the Green Party to split the vote. It's the most important election ever. But never bring up that there is a way that that spoiler issue goes away and becomes a non-issue for them. And that is through ranked choice voting and proportional representation. So I'm going to give the floor over to Howie and Matt, but Howie, why don't you start us out tonight?
Well, I think this is one of the top issues for the Green Party. We've always come up against the spoiler dilemma, whereas you just described, Rose, people who would like to vote for us say, I can't because it'll take vote from the Democrat and elect a Republican, who's even worse. And this has become a bigger problem in the era of Trump, when the Republicans are not just a conservative party anymore. They're an extremist right-wing party, racist, authoritarian, anti-democratic, and their policy positions are terrible. So that spoiler dilemma is even a bigger factor than ever for us. And running for president in 2020 with Trump on the ballot, that's what we faced. Most of the public intellectuals in this country who call themselves socialists were telling people to vote for the capitalist Democrats. To me, that was a lack of faith in their own professed political perspective. I would argue that socialists can fight fascists better than neoliberal Democrats who tend to accommodate them. I mean, Biden at this point is still seeking bipartisan coalitions around legislation. And that's why we haven't seen much get done. Why would you try to form a coalition with a party that tried to overthrow your election? But that's the Democrats. But given the electoral system, it sets up that spoiler dilemma. So what ranked choice voting does in a single person election is you rank your choices and take a presidential race. Okay, somebody's afraid of Trump. They like Howie Hawkins and the Green Party ticket, so they could rank Hawkins first, Biden second, and leave Trump, they could put some other minor parties there in their rankings and leave Trump alone. So they could vote for what they want without helping the one they hate the most. So that solves the spoiler problem. And then when we get to legislatures, we can have proportional ranked choice voting, where you have multi-member districts. You still rank your choices 1, 2, 3. The winning threshold is lower so that in a 9-member district, for example, the winning threshold is 10%. So any party that has 10% support for their candidates gets a seat. And if you get 20%, you get 2 seats and so forth. And that way we can have a multi-party system and people can vote for what they want without worrying about helping their worst enemy. And I think, we need Matthew O in the Senate so he can introduce companion legislation to a bill that's already in the House for proportional ranked choice voting for the representatives in the House, which would mean if it's a single small state, single district like Alaska, then it would be just, ranked choice voting. But in larger states, this bill says you'd have districts of 3 to 5 candidates, which means, parties like the Green Party could get some seats. And then for senators, the bill requires ranked choice voting, which are single seat elections. And unfortunately, and I have an article just came out in Capitol Hill Citizen saying that the progressives in Congress are missing in action on this. Where is AOC and the Progressive Caucus? There are only 9 sponsors or co-sponsors of that bill. It's called the Fair Representation Act. And there's nobody in the Senate. So, that's the kind of thing we get Matt in there. He can introduce that, a bill to have national ranked choice voting for president. We could have a bill introduced for fair ballot access, a federal standard that makes it reasonable. The last bill that did that was introduced by John Conyers in 1989. So the Democrats, look, the only Republicans elected in the 21st century to president lost the popular vote. They got installed by the Electoral College. You would think that the Democrats would get behind a bill to get rid of the Electoral College and have a national popular vote. Even better, a ranked choice vote. And they're not. Instead, they turn around and they hire Mark Elias and his big law firm to attack Greens like they did Matt, like they've done in other states that did our campaign in 2020 to keep us off the ballot. And, party suppression is a form of voter suppression. It's the way the Democrats do it in this country. It's what authoritarian governments do. That's why we need Greens like Matt in the Senate. So we get these bills introduced, we can mobilize a campaign around it. And I think, the progressives in Congress can be shamed into supporting this legislation. And I think we can make progress. We're making progress at the local and state level. Just going into the 2020 election, there was just over 20 jurisdictions where there was ranked choice voting in local elections. Since then, we're up to over 55 last count that I know of, 2 states, Maine and Alaska. It's going to be on the ballot in Nevada as an initiative. Now, there are problems there because they have this jungle primary before you get to the ranked choice voting in the general election, which we can discuss. I think that undermines parties' ability to nominate their own candidates. But the point is, this is a reform that's winning and we can make advances on it. So I think I've said enough. I'll stop there and let Matt say something.
Yeah, thanks, Howie. Thanks for joining me tonight. And yeah, no one better to talk about this than you. And thank you, everyone, for being with us. I see a lot of names I recognize, a lot of folks who've just been so supportive of the campaign, and some names I don't recognize. So some new folks joining us tonight. Welcome. Thank you for coming. I hope you find this interesting and helpful. And yeah, please make sure you're putting questions into the Q&A, or if you're on, if you're on Facebook or YouTube, putting them into those chats there, so we can have some discussion later on. But what I see, Howie, over and over again, and it's becoming more it's just so present in how people talk about elections now. This idea of not voting for someone or voting for some platform or because you have a certain belief or economic or political philosophy, but rather voting against someone, right? I mean, and you see that where, yeah, there are plenty of people who are voting for candidate A or candidate B, but every year the number of people who are voting against candidate A and candidate B increases, and that does a lot of different things, right? I mean, that causes apathy among voters. It causes people to lose interest. It's dysfunctional. It's toxic for our society, our culture, our political environment, and what it also leads the politicians to and the parties to is this notion that not to try and deliver things from people, but rather to present politics in a us versus them fear-based manner. And so you look at the way it works now, which is, as our man Dave Schwab calls it, plurality takes all system, where it's just getting enough to get your party forward, as opposed to actually meeting the voters, getting to know what their needs are and responding to those. And I think that a lot of what we have here is just systemic with the system itself, right? So that, this idea of having these reforms, these much needed reforms. And I mean, the list of reforms is as long as our arms are, right? I mean, in sense of, it's just not about replacing this plurality takes all type of system with ranked choice voting and proportional representation. But as you said as well, it's getting rid of the electoral college. It's getting money out of politics, right? It's introducing other needed measures that connect constituents to their representative and hold those representatives accountable. So, I mean, that's what I keep coming back to as I, run this race, as like more people I'm involved with, the more people I come in contact with, is this notion that, it's not about voting for someone, it's about voting against someone. And so ranked choice and proportional representation, by extension, really takes that away, right? It really forces it to come back to more of an issues-based voting.
I think that's a question for you, Howie.
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
Matt froze.
Oh, no.
Continue going. Your question is, will ranked choice voting improve elections so people are focused on issues?
Right. It brings us back to issues
positively instead of defensively.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, what I see, and what I feel, and not just me, lots of people, right? You look at it and you see how people, they do this like political jujitsu before they go to the ballot box. They have to pretend they're a Fox News pundit or an MSNBC pundit to figure out who is the lesser of two evils, right? And so they're going to the ballot box already compromising their vote. And the thing for me about voting in politics is that it's not supposed to be about the voter compromising. This is what we elect people to do. The compromise is supposed to take place at your city council, your county commission, and your state legislature, and the American Congress, not at the ballot box by the voter, right? So this idea, having these types of reforms, ranked choice voting and proportional representation, that brings us back towards issues-based voting, correct?
Yeah, it encourages issues and it encourages positive campaigns. I think we just saw that in Alaska, where in the first round, Mary Peltola, who is the Democrat, she's an Alaska native, she's Yupik, she got 40% of the vote. Sarah Palin got 31%, and Nick Begich, the other Republican, got 29%. So that's the first round. You needed over 50% of majority to win. Okay.
Your AP, you are being heard live. So
hey, AP,
please mute yourself. Thank you.
There we go. We've had, just as an aside, so starting to laugh, we've had such a day with technology That's like our man AP who's doing all this work for us. His microphone being, that's like the least of it today, guys. Like that's like the least of our technology troubles today. So I'm just waiting to see what comes up next technology wise for us. Hopefully we get through the next hour without our computers bursting into flames, because that's the trajectory we're heading on towards today. So, but Howie, I'm sorry, back to you, man.
Okay, so Tola 40%, Palin 31%, Begich 29%. So Begich is out. So where do his votes go? And he's a Republican. So you would think, Palin would get enough votes from his totals to go over the top, but it didn't happen because Palin, even among Republicans, has a lot of negatives. So in the end, about 15,000 votes went to Patola and 30,000 to Palin. But since Patola was further ahead, it put her over the top. She got 51.5% and won the election. So she's the most preferred candidate, because a lot of those Republicans remember that Palin was the governor of Alaska. And after she ran for vice president, she quit. So a lot of them just like, no, we're not going to put her back in a position of responsibility. And Palin ran a negative campaign. The dynamic in a ranked choice voting campaign is you want to put your own program out there, and you want to appeal to the supporters of other candidates, so they'll give you their second choices, so you don't attack them. But Palin was so, sour grapes. She was attacking ranked choice voting. It's like Trump attacking the results of the election months before it happened. So, a lot of those Republicans said, I may be Republican, but I'm not for Palin. I'm gonna go with this Democrat. So in the end, the most preferred candidate won. Whereas in this case, if it had been a plurality election, Patola would have won, but without a majority. So the good thing about ranked choice voting is it shows you who has the most support, and it shows a candidate like Patola, she ran on her issues, and she wasn't negative. Begich was pretty negative toward Palin too. So while they're fighting over here, Patola's being positive. And when you get in a fight, you may get mud on your hands and mud on your opponent, you get mud on your own hands. So I saw the dynamic really work like this when what's his name? Al Sharpton ran for Senate in 2002 in New York. And it was a Democratic primary. And the Democrats all had their knives out for each other, and they were slicing each other to bits. And Sharpton just stood aside from it, put out a positive program, even made it funny. He brought a bucket to one debate, and the reporter said, "What's that for?" And he said, "Well, it's a bucket of mud in case they run out." And, kind of drove home the point that he's putting forward. And at that time, Sharpton's reputation in New York was not very good. But after that campaign, it elevated him, which shows, in a multi-candidate race, you're better off being positive most of the time. And ranked choice voting lets that come out and lets the candidate with the most support win.
Right. And I think your example there, how explaining what happened just literally yesterday in Alaska, really proves that point, where you have a personality like Palin. If you have the ability to weigh your preferences, it allows people not to worry about the Democrat winning or about the evil Republican winning. And this is one of the things, I'm really, some of the stats that as I get more involved with this and they become more apparent to me, and it backs up, what I'm experiencing, running, and everything else. But, you see things that like between 40 and 50% of Democrats feel that Republicans are evil. And the Republicans have the same number, but 40 to 50% of Republicans feel that Democrats are evil, right? Again, it all becomes like this identity, us versus thing. They are the other, and completely away from issues, which of course is what the two major parties want, which is of course what the parties that are, they overlap and align on issues of war and Wall Street and health insurance companies and big pharma and big ag and, fossil fuels and all those other things. I mean, that's what they want. They want people to get distracted by politicians like Sarah Palin, right? Get distracted by the fear of the evil Democrats. And it really does. I think that what you just described happened in Alaska. This type of expansion of democracy, this strengthening of democracy, please consider joining Better Ballot in North Carolina. I was actually one of the founding members of it a couple of years ago. Hopefully when this is all done, I'll continue working with them in some manner, because this really is, when we talk about the status quo being life and death for so many, we understand how the status quo is itself a reflection of the political system that enables it. Well, how do you bring about an end to that political system? How do you change that? How do you make anything, and certainly doing it from the inside. And I think, one of the things I want to talk to you about, Howie, is what they've done in New York. Moving on from ranked choice voting and proportional representation onto issues of ballot access. But one of the things that, I've come to understand in my life is this idea that trying to change something from the inside is just not going to happen. And nothing is going to change on its own, right? I mean, so what they're afraid of is that there are going to be multiple parties, that there are going to be independent candidates, that grassroots campaigns are going to be on the ballot. And that's going to disrupt the two-party system, the system that they have so expertly at amazing cost, but through decades of hard work on the Democrats, Republicans part, created this gerrymandered system where, if you go through all the elections throughout the entire country, all the way down to the county level, the local dog catcher, everything else, 70% of our elections in the United States are unopposed. In something like, in the US Congress, only 8% of elections this year are going to be competitive, right? I mean, that's what they want. And so the solution for us is to, run multiple candidates, run other parties, get grassroots campaigns onto the ballot line. And that's a threat, because that's going to force the system to change. And so what they do is they try and keep you off the ballot, like they did to us in North Carolina. They were not successful. We've had some victories this week, as we've seen. For people, just let people know, the Democrats have dropped their lawsuits in federal appeals court as well as in state court. So we are putting a lot of this behind us and being able to move forward and fully campaign. So another big victory for us, and so grateful for everybody on the campaign, everybody part of the North Carolina Green Party, all of our supporters who got us these victories, to get us to this point. But can you go into, Howie, what they did to you all in New York? Because this is really, really extreme. I mean, in sense of what they did, as well as to kind of more of a general lay of the land across the U.S. In terms of how ballot access is used as a form of voter suppression.
Sure, but let me first say that one of the things that proportional representation does, which can be proportional ranked choice voting, is it makes gerrymandering impossible. Because no matter how you draw the lines, every party is going to get its proportional share from multi-member districts. So all this, drama and anxiety about gerrymandering would disappear if the Fair Representation Act, which has been introduced in the House, as I mentioned, were enacted. And instead of doing that, we have these court battles over districts. And, so the Greens are sitting here with a solution, and the two major parties, I don't know, maybe just a lot of lawyers are making money off all the lawsuits and whatnot. But anyway, what happened here in New York is Green Party has been on the ballot for a decade. And I got 5% of the vote running against Cuomo in 2014. And that made a difference. Cuomo, after that election, before which he wanted to run up the vote, get more than his father, Mario Cuomo, ever got, get more than he got when he was first elected in 2010, and he got less. And he said, well, what did the Greens talk about that, got him all those votes, almost 200,000 votes? And it was a ban on fracking, $15 minimum wage, paid family leave. These are things Cuomo had never supported or openly opposed. And after that election, he switched his branding from being, the fiscally responsible social liberal to being the pragmatic progressive. So, he basically tried to co-opt our issues. That's fine. He implemented them in a half-assed way, but it was progress. So we come to 2020, and we're all locked down with COVID, and they're implementing a public campaign finance system in New York. So using the excuse that we can't afford to give that money to third-party candidates, to quote unquote trivial candidates or parties. They said parties. The point is the money goes to candidates who qualify. It doesn't go to parties. So to knock parties off the ballot was really irrelevant to the campaign finance angle. But they used that excuse to ram through when the legislature was sitting at home meeting virtually a ballot access law that basically tripled the requirements to get on the ballot and to stay on the ballot. So now we come into 2022, and there were 8 petitions, independent nominating petitions for governor from different candidates, including the major party candidates who were trying to set another ballot line for themselves because we have fusion in New York. And all of them failed. And that's because we had to get 45,000 signatures in 42 days, which is, really a difficult task.
That's just, just after what we did, where we collected 22,500 signatures over the course of many months.
Right.
And we did a great job. Like our folks, North Carolina Green Party did a fantastic job with that. And it still was months for us to get that number. Right. And I tell you, if we had we had great weather, everything kind of fell in place for us. So this idea of getting 45,000 signatures in 45 days,
42 days.
In 42 days. Because those 3 days would matter. Yeah.
The old standard was 15,000 in 42 days, which was not easy. But we had done it in 1998, 2002, 2006, and 2010. And then we got a ballot line. With a ballot line, we could nominate by convention for statewide offices without having to do a petition. So while we were out there trying to get 45,000 signatures in 42 days, the Democratic and Republican candidates didn't have to get a single signature. So, it's an unequal system. So we have a bill that we drafted for the legislature. We've been shopping around that would take us back to the old standard. And the current petition in New York is 3 times harder than the nearest comparable petition we could find, which is if you want to run as an independent for the state Duma in Russia from one of their equivalents of the state, it's 15,000 signatures in 45 days. They get 3 more days. So I would joke with the legislators and their staff, we just want to get back to the Putin standard. And they'd all chuckle and they'd admit we're right. But then none of them wanted to stick their neck out and introduce the bill because they didn't want the governor and the state party chair of the Democratic Party on their back when they're running for re-election. So I think we'll get that bill introduced next session, but we're still looking for somebody with a little courage who's in the legislature. And, you compare the United States to other countries in terms of how difficult it is to get on a ballot. The best comparison is running for the national parliament, national Congress, the equivalent of Congress. In this country, in most states, it's thousands or tens of thousands of signatures. It goes as high as 40,000 signatures in Indiana, 20,000 in Georgia, 30,000 in Alabama, 15,000 in Illinois, New York, 3,500, which for a congressional district, I've done that petition. It's difficult because you only have 42 days and you really need 7,000 to be safe. If you want to do the same thing in the United Kingdom, run for the House of Commons, it's 10 signatures. If you want to run for the unicameral parliament in New Zealand, it's 2 signatures. It's 100 in Australia. It's 100 in Canada, unless you're in a rural district, it's 50. It's 200 in Germany. And then you got the Putin standard. But this country is off the chart. Now, there was a bill, and this is another thing that, if you get into the Senate, you got to introduce. And that is a fair ballot access bill, have a federal standard for federal elections. And the last time that was introduced, a progressive bill was John Conyers, the former Democrat from Detroit, in 1989. And it just hasn't been on their agenda. But, what he proposed is 1,000 signatures or 1/10 of 1% of the votes for that office in the previous election, which is much lower than most states. And you would have a 7-month period to collect between February and August. So that would solve the problem we got in New York. And in a keep ballot line, it would be 20,000 votes or 1% of the votes for president or senator in that state, whichever is less. So, that's much more reasonable than what we have now. And, I'm gonna put that bill, a link to it in the chat for people that might want to look at it. But what are we now? 33 years since there was a reasonable bill proposed by some progressive in the Congress for fair ballot access? It's a shame. It's really a shame. What we have is an excuse for progressive legislators in our Congress.
Right, and I just had a conversation about this kind of stuff the other day with a journalist here in North Carolina last week, or maybe a little longer than that, and talking about these kinds of things. And I brought up the whole ballot access thing because I said there really what should be coming out of what occurred to us here in North Carolina and what's occurred to you all in New York and all across the country should be a discussion about what's fair, what's reasonable, what's just, what is democratic. And what I get is just as you would expect, Howie, right? The standard response, the conventional wisdom, the thing that's been inculcated in everyone. Oh, you can't do that. You can't just let anybody on the ballot. It would be chaos, and this idea that you can't only need 100 signatures, the whole system would fall apart. It'd be overwhelmed, and that's not happening in Australia. United Kingdom doesn't have like their elections aren't undone because too many people are on the ballot. I've heard other people say it before. I think maybe I heard you say it, like you go to a restaurant, you're not overwhelmed because there are 40 choices on it, but you wouldn't even have that, right? I mean, so it is like so much of it is the arguments against are specious and disingenuous, but they've been inculcated in us. They've really been burned into us that this is the standard reasons why we can't do this. We can't have more permissive ballot access because it would cause chaos. We can't just let every party do so you have all these arguments that when you actually examine, similar to many other things, right? We can't have universal health care. Well, everyone else has it. Why can't we? That type of just, feeding a specious, spurious, disingenuous line that unfortunately, because of the way the system is, both sides benefit, both sides, Democrats and Republicans. Even here I am, right? Someone who is running to bring down this inane idea of having a horizontal access that defines our entire political spectrum. Here I am. I still use things like this saying both sides. That's how deeply ingrained it in us in terms of our language and our constructs and how we view things. But, one of the things I think that's important for people to understand is that there are a variety of success work. This is where it's gaining ground. You mentioned some earlier, but if you want to go back over some of those again, maybe in a little more detail in terms of giving people places to look to see which states have done better at this, certainly than say North Carolina or New York.
And just to add, since I want to get to questions soon, I think Nick DeDonna's question, which is, how can we make this a reality? How can we spread the word on RCV and make this a reality? I think that's kind of encompassed in this.
Holy cow, I've never seen us have this many questions before. And for people who don't know, Nick DeDonna was a rock star for us all through the spring. He is a big reason why we are on the ballot. So thank you, Nick. But Howie?
Well, I think we do it from the bottom up. There are over 55 local jurisdictions that now have it. And most of them was a group like Better Ballot in a local setting that, came up with a proposal and either got the city council or town council to introduce it. Sometimes it requires not just a change in the law, but a change in the city charter. but they got that on the ballot and it was voted by the people, or it was voted by the council where that was possible. So that's something we can do locally. And the more we do it locally, the more it builds the movement, the more people voting with ranked choice voting are familiar with it. And so I think that's the way we do it. Now, they brought it to the state level in Maine and Alaska, and they're going to talk about it. I guess it's be on the ballot. I'm not sure whether it's this year or next year in Nevada. So you can do state initiatives. That's a much bigger task. But there is a lot of sort of, and this gets to the jungle primary first, the open primary, and then ranked choice voting in the general. There's a lot of wealthy money behind that. And I think we should oppose the jungle primaries. You know, the parties should be able to put their own candidates forward, have their own members make that decision. And that can be done by ranked choice voting. And
right. And can you, for people who aren't in California, right? Can you explain what jungle primary is and why? A little more into that, because when I first heard of jungle primaries, I thought that's a great idea. But as I've come to see how it works and the reality of it, I don't agree with it, just as you don't.
Yeah, well, in California, it's top 2. In Alaska, it's top 4. I think the proposal in Nevada is top 4. But what it means is anybody can just put a filing fee in and they're on the ballot. So you get like 30 people wanting to run for governor in California. And the Greens will meet and designate their favorite candidate. But other people who are Greens can just file their candidacy and be on the ballot too. So the masses of Green voters out there looking for the Green candidate, they don't know who the organized party recommended. So it undermines the party organization. And, somebody with a lot of money can come in, say as a Green, and advertise and get their name recognition up there, even if they have principles opposed to the Green Party. I mean, we've seen that with the major parties just given primaries. You've had Lyndon LaRouche win Democratic primaries, who's basically a fascist conspiracy guy.
Right.
And you've had David Duke win Republican primaries. And then, the Democrats and Republicans have to repudiate their own candidate. We should enable the parties to pick their own candidate in the primaries. And then in general election, have a ranked choice voting between the party designated candidates. If you have these jungle primaries or open primaries with all comers, then the party organization and members are kind of rendered irrelevant. So it undermines parties. And we need parties because those are places where people can get educated and organized around the principles that they support. And if without that, you just have atomized voters, just watching TV or their screen on the computer or their phone, and they're being advertised that by very wealthy interests, but there isn't that horizontal communication and discussion where, we really get smarter. 30-second ads make us stupider. So I have a problem with those open jungle primaries.
Yeah. And just to let people know, we had a problem with our chat. It looks like the chat is now working. Is that right, Rose? Looks like it.
Well, again, not 100. The chat is working, Matt. It's just we can't see it.
See, we have
people are going to tell us things.
Okay. All right. Okay.
It's as Matt said earlier, it's just a day where if something can technically go wrong, it's going to. So
yeah. So like it is what it is. But
it is what it is.
Yeah. So, but okay. Yeah. Thanks for Howie. Because sometimes you see these things and you think, well, that makes sense to have a big open thing. And, but when you see how it actually works and how it, a lot of times, like you said, if someone's got name recognition, so if they're a celebrity or they just have the money to overwhelm everyone else and put them on top of a 30, 40 person field, that's not what we're really striving for here, right? We're striving to get it back to issues based, right? We're striving to get it back to answering the needs of people, their neighbors, their communities, et cetera. But
plus, what tends to happen is third party candidates don't get through the jungle primary.
Yeah.
So in California, if it's a Republican district, you'll have 2 Republicans. If it's a Democratic district, you'll have 2 Democrats in the general.
Right.
And the Greens rarely get through, only in special circumstances where, there's not many candidates. It's just very rare. Like in Alaska, no third party candidate got through the the open primary to the ranked choice voting in the general election. So
Yeah.
it's like a bottleneck we don't get through to the general election.
Right. And there's a lot of things that go into it too, right? I mean, some of it's keeping us out of the debates, right? Some of it's just making sure that people aren't learning about us, that they don't know who we are, what we stand for, or that it's just the rumors or the smears or Matt Hogue guy, wasn't he the guy who was committing fraud this past year in the elections? Like that kind of thing, those smears that get attached to us, but then other things too, because I see Justin's online, Justin Paglino, who's running up in Connecticut, with the Green Party, please check out Justin's site. Justin, put it in the chat. Your website. Please go and support Justin. Great guy. We need him in Congress. But as from what I saw this week, if I remember correctly, Justin is being kept out of debates. So you have that other aspect too, where even if you get on the ballot, even you get past all these hurdles, the idea of them being heard, them being seen. That's a whole new fight you now have. And I know you, Howie, can talk about that, your experiences with that in terms of being able to debate, whether it be Cuomo, whether it be able to debate Biden and Trump, all these different types. You've effectively been shut out because, you win, right?
Well, I've actually been in 2 debates with Cuomo in 2014. But the thing there is the media were waiting for Cuomo to tell him how to do the debate because he's the big star. He's the incumbent governor, big name in New York. And so, I would have reporters say, I want you in the debate, but management is not going to do anything Cuomo doesn't want to do. Well, in 2010, he figured his best strategy. That year we had, I think, 8 candidates for governor, the most we ever had. He figured the more the merrier, it would just divide up all his opposition. In 2014, he went with the same tack, but then we got 5%. So in 2018, he wouldn't debate, except he set debates. He'd tell the media, I'll debate the Republican Astorino, on your radio station or your TV station at this time. I mean, Cuomo was dictating the terms. So we got to demand that the media, what the media should do, or really civic organizations like the League of Women Voters that used to sponsor the presidential debates, they should say, we're going to have a debate for all ballot qualified candidates. Here's the time, here's the format, and invite the candidates. Right. And if some big muckety muck like Cuomo doesn't show, that's on them, and that hurts. We just had a Republican primary in my district where the most well-funded establishment, Republican machine-backed candidate got his ass kicked because he wouldn't debate and he wouldn't take interviews with the media. And the Republican voters in that primary said, to hell with that. We want the guy, even if we don't agree with him so much, who talks to us.
Right.
So, it can be done. So it's really on the media. The other thing is locally, the Greens have been a strong presence, constructive, positive policies, to the point where the media insisted we be in debates. And there wasn't a big personality like Cuomo that could keep us out, although they tried. For example, by trying to keep us from getting on the ballot. So one of those times I ran for Congress, got the 3,500 good signatures, really about 7,000 signatures. The Democratic candidate challenged. It was a trivial challenge. He was challenging signatures are obviously good, but that, then you had to have a review at the Board of Election and then follow that by a court case. And so he was saying that whole time that I shouldn't be in debates because I'm not on the ballot. But by that point, we had such standing, the media was saying, no, Howie gets on the ballot and he'll be a constructive part of the debate. We're going to have him. But you sort of have to build up your relationship to the media locally to be able to get into debates. So right. It's a battle, but it's not one we can't win. Right. I want to make one other point. And I forgot what it was. So I'll come back to it.
Okay, because first I want to tell people, thank you so much. This is really generating a fantastic amount of questions. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but please contact us. I'm going to write it in this, my email address within the host. Oh, wait, I can send it. I can send something to everyone. Oh, it's so exciting. Oh, my chat has been enabled again. I'm very happy. So I'm going to give you all my email address. And so this conversation can keep going beyond tonight. But I'm so excited that people are really, really into this discussion. And I actually want to ask a question it's not specific to RCB, but I think it's there's people here, Matt, who they don't really know you. And this is from Dalton and Ashley Peppers. And I will tell you, I know Ashley from the 15 Now movement in St. Petersburg, way back in the ancient days of, I don't know, 2014, 2015. We really worked on that issue together. I've never met her husband, but I know they're a very happy couple. And what they want to know is to say more about what it is to be a green candidate and what you plan to do for peace.
It's being a green candidate, because I get that question a lot. Why didn't you run as a progressive Democrat? Well, I've never been a Democrat in my life, and I've been around them enough, worked with them enough, was inside it enough in DC in a nonpartisan manner, particularly doing anti-war work. But going back to, all through, the last 20 years, I've done most of my work in DC, whether it was in the Pentagon, whether it was, at a think tank, what have you. I'm not that. The Green Party is a party of principles. It's a party of values. It's a party of shared and cooperative concern for one another, for our families, our friends, our neighbors. Its commitments are commitments that hobble us and make things a lot harder. Look, if I wanted to run as a progressive Democrat, things would be a lot easier for me. And if I want to go back to that, you don't have to worry about, you can expense this and we'll put you up in this hotel and you got these consultants and, here's your Act Blue account and all the 15 other associated donation accounts that come with it. And here's all that money. Don't ask where that money's coming from, because that would violate your principles. But, it's harder in the Green Party. It's not easy. The resources are limited, but that's because this is a party that stands for principles, that stands on value, that has a philosophy, a political and economic philosophy that it follows. People come to that philosophy for a variety of reasons, right? Some of it, because of the books they read, the teachers they've had, now the YouTube videos they've watched or whatever. But almost everyone who comes to it because of their life's experiences. They've seen the reality of the economic and political system, the structures we have in this country and what that does, the hierarchy, the caste system, the racial injustice, and they will not work within it because they know that it's corrupting. Look, you can't, this is a lesson I learned the very hard way going to war. I regret it so very much, but this idea that you're somehow going to be a moral actor, in an organism like war, and that somehow your moral agency is going to remain intact. You're not going to become an agent of that larger thing, something that's much larger than man. And in this political system we have, this economic system we have, right? This hierarchical, white supremacist, caste colonialist system that we have, with all its centuries behind it, is not anything that one person's moral agency is going to be able to stand up to. So it is. You have to be on the outside. And so you find an organization, you find a party, you come across these people like I have over the last, however many decades, and, you end up being a part of it because that's where you belong. And like I said, it's harder, but it's worth it. And it's the only way we're going to get things to change, because we think we're going to change things from the inside. It's not going to happen. It would have happened decades ago. It's not going to happen. And so we have to change it from the outside. We have to put pressure on the system, and we have to come back to a place where we're working on our principles and our values, right? That it's not about getting to the ends however means we can, but about maintaining a commitment to our principles and values that ensure that the ends we reach are those ends we intended to reach, right? So, and it made a candidate for peace Certainly, peace comes in many forms, and it's not easy. And I go back to Dr. King's admonition about this, about peace is not the absence of tension, it's the presence of justice. That's a positive peace in Dr. King's words. That is, but an absence of tension, that type of peace, that's a very easy peace to attain. But that's not a peace worth having. But Howie, do you have thoughts on that? About, you've been a Green much longer than me, so I'm sure you have you've got some thoughts on it.
Well, in my experience, the Greens, particularly in local elections, are the only ones that come with any ideas and proposals, and so we can set the debate, which brings me back to the point I forgot earlier in answering the question of how do we promote ranked choice voting and proportional representation. And I think our candidates like Matt and Justin Paglino and all our candidates, we need to challenge our opponents to support, whatever it is at the state, local, or federal level, the ranked choice voting legislation and the fair ballot access legislation. And, insist that they give an answer and get the media to badger them if they don't give a direct answer. And if the answer is yes, then we say, see, the Greens make a difference, a positive difference. We won somebody over. And if they say no, we can shame them and contrast their position with ours, which is, for a multi-party inclusive democracy. So I think, that should be part of every Greens campaign at this point, to change the electoral system. We set the debate. We also, the thing about being Green is you don't get caught up, as I was saying during the presidential race, you don't get lost in the sauce. The Democrats have a certain image. It's ruled by the corporate elites, the kind of policies that you get from Biden and Schumer and Pelosi. And if you're part of that, you're giving legitimacy to them. We need our own identity and alternative platform. And that means an independent political party. Otherwise, we get lost in the sauce. And you can be for single-payer healthcare and deep cuts in the military budget and all those good things. But if you're caught up in the Democratic Party, or you vote for Democrats, you're voting against those things. So, the thing about running as a Green is it's clear where we stand. It's clear to the voters to the extent we can reach them. And, that's a whole nother discussion. We were partly talking about it with debates, but, just that independent identity and platform is so important. It broadens the debate. Inside the Democratic Party, you get muffled and you end up, if you're successful, having a compromise so that, AOC is crying on the House floor because of so much pressure to get her to vote on some bill related to Israel. I forget exactly what it was, but
it was the Iron Dome weapon systems.
Yeah. And she really didn't want to do it, but they twisted her arms to the point where she was crying because she violated her own conscience. That's what happens. And you mentioned all the, Act Blue and all the other stuff that comes with that becomes like, how am I going to get reelected if I don't have that? And AOC, she has one of the biggest small donor bases nationally in the country. If you look at the members of Congress, there are only about 15 or 20 that get more donations from small donors than big donors. And she's one of them. She has a national base, but it tends to be the high profile people like Bernie Sanders or Marjorie Taylor Greene and, people like that on the right. Most people, they're not national figures. So they really, if they're in the Democratic Party, they become dependent on the machine, and then the machine's got them in its gears.
Right, exactly.
So let me, this has been such a lively discussion, and I still have a couple more questions. So one is from Jeremy Ritt. And Jeremy Ritt, just for the record, used to be the secretary of the Pinellas County Green Party in Florida when I was co-chair back in the day too. And Jeremy is asking if there are any Green Party approved resources for advocating for RCV in their states. Now I know that Jeremy is in Tennessee, but what do we have out there for people in state parties who want to advocate for RCV?
Well, I would say the place to start is Fair Vote. It's one word, fairvote.org. They just have all kinds of educational materials, and you can read through that and get very well educated. Also, news on what's going on. There's another group, I'm forgetting the formal name. They've got some money to organize in states for ranked choice voting. I think it's called, ranked choice. Geez, I forget. But if you Google around, you can find, I think, that group. Represent Us is a group, if I remember correctly, is advocating particularly for women who do better under ranked choice voting. And I should have wrote down this group. There's a civil rights group, because some of the ranked choice voting has been introduced in response to civil rights challenges to the unfair plurality take all systems, sometimes at-large systems, sometimes district systems in cities. So it was African Americans in a town in Michigan. I may have the name wrong, Grosse Pointe, I think. It was Chicanos in Desert Palm, California, and Asians in Albany, California, who either brought or were getting ready to bring civil rights lawsuits, saying as ethnic minorities, they were being excluded by this winner-take-all system. And they got proportional ranked choice voting introduced as a remedy rather than just ranked choice voting from single-member districts, which, we really need to be for proportional ranked choice voting for legislative races. Single district ranked choice voting changes very little. You look at Australia, they have single district ranked choice voting for their House and proportional representation, proportional ranked choice voting for their Senate. The Greens are a party of a little bit over 10% in Australia. They have about 10% of the senators, because that's proportional ranked choice voting, and they just got 3 out of 150 before they had 1 in the House, much lower than the 10% vote they got nationwide. So the big change is proportional representation, proportional ranked choice voting. That's what we need to push for on the legislative side. That's how we get a multi-party system, and the Greens get their fair share of representation.
Yeah, and I'll just, again, if you're here in North Carolina, betterballotnc.org. That's the, Better Ballot North Carolina. That's the organization that's working for ranked choice voting here in North Carolina. Unlike in other states, we don't have we don't have ballot referendums in North Carolina, so we can't vote in ranked choice voting here. You have to, we have to bring it in through the legislature. But part of the thing is, run more candidates, more grassroots campaign, more independent parties. What we're looking at here is interesting to see, because I was looking to see if Andrew Yang's Forward Party had started their petition yet, because they have said that North Carolina is one of the 15 states that they want to have ballot access in by the end of this year. And so they have not, but they are planning to do so. And then the Constitution Party is working to get on the ballot here. They're a right-wing party. And the Constitution Party, though, according just to our co-chair of the North Carolina Green Party down here, Tony Ndege, he's been told by them that they are under, because after what happened to us, they're under more intense scrutiny of their petitions than before. So unfortunately, I think, as we kind of all suspected, the lesson that the state and the legislature is going to take away from our experience this past year is not to make it more fair, not to make it more just or democratic, but to tighten the screws, because if these Greens got in, then these Constitution Party guys are going to get in, these Forward Party guys are going to get in. There's like 5 or 6 other parties that are trying to emerge here in North Carolina. Not sure how much support they have. One of them is the No Labels Party, which has got, God help us, Larry Hogan and Joe Lieberman as their co-chairs. But so, the possibility is that in 2024, you could have in North Carolina 6 or 7 parties on the ballot, plus potentially independents. And that really puts the pressure then on the legislature to do something, because you run all those parties in this system set up for 2 parties, it breaks it, it disrupts it, it causes problems. And so for their own sake, the Republicans and Democrats need to embrace these types of reforms, because we're not going to stop, we're not going to bend a knee, we're not going to compromise and come into their tent because they're dangling nice things to us, or because Nancy Pelosi or Steny Hoyer or Mitch McConnell says something nasty to us, so yeah, that's but there are a lot of resources out there, a lot of organizations, and please support them as you can.
Hey, thank you. And so my last question is going to be from, it was from somebody who didn't want to give their name, an anonymous attendee. Would you be open to alternative voting methods outside of ranked choice voting? And gives examples of star voting with STAR in all caps, and Condorcet being used for political party elections. That is definitely a question I don't know a lot about, but Howie, I suspect if somebody really knows a lot about it, it would be you.
Well, star voting, you don't, I'm not that familiar with star voting. I thought, there's approval voting where you can accept, everybody, you state who's acceptable to you.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to get the most acceptable candidate. A couple states did that in our Green Party presidential primaries.
Oh, I remember, Howie. Fun.
They didn't agree on the math of how to count the approvals. And I also know people were gaming it. They were saying, well, don't give approval to this or that candidate because it'll hurt your candidate, which is what it's vulnerable to. Star voting, I'm not sure if this is what it is, but it may be a system where you maybe have 5 votes for 5 seats, and you can give them all to one candidate, or you can spread them around 3 to 1, 2 to another, or 1 for 5, each of your 5 top choices. That's more complicated. Ranked choice voting, I think, is a lot more simpler. And then Condorcet is where you rank each candidate against every other one. And there's, for very technical mathematical reasons, that, measures voter preference well. In fact, Ralph Nader would have won the national election in 2000 if we'd have had that system, according to a political scientist at Harvard who used exit polling data to get the preferences of each candidate ranked against the other. But it's very complicated. I think you want a voting system that people understand and is transparent, which I think ranked choice voting is. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3 for the voter.
Yeah. Yeah, because my understanding with the star voting is, you can give someone 5 points, you can give someone 4 points, you can give them 3 points, 2 points, whatever it is. It's more complicated, and I think you're not really giving your preference as much. I think it's just the way that you can game it, manipulate it. You can give. I mean, it just, it's what I like about ranked choice voting. Exactly what you said, Howie. It's simple. Like, these are my preferences: 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, or maybe just 1. You don't have to put 2 or 3. You can just. I mean, it's most people get it. And I saw an exit poll from Alaska, because, again, going back to Alaska, Sarah Palin's loss, the use of RCV up there, and the exit poll clearly showed that people felt ranked choice voting was very simple to use. That's one of the things that they'll throw out there. It's like, oh, it's too complicated. People can't choose. You can't trust the electorate to do anything other than vote for red or blue. So, but you see that. So, Rose, I don't know if you had any more questions, or if there's something you wanted to read from the chat.
I have probably about 30 more questions, but I'm not going to actually ask them. And I do apologize to people for not being able to get to all the questions. I'm really glad this has been such a lively discussion. And, I know it's getting late, but it's that time. It's that time when we start talking about fundraising for this campaign. And one exciting thing that happened was Vicky Ryder wrote and said that she wants to donate $1,000 tonight, but she also wanted me to promote that because she wants to encourage others to do it. So I think people who've done these before, it's like, she's not starting with 2,900. Look, if you want to donate the maximum 2,900, I ain't gonna stop you. But in fact, we really, need we really need the funds, and part of it is that we don't have the millions of dollars in corporate money that's given to the Democrats and Republicans. And that makes it very hard to do things like advertise, to get the message out there. You know, the Democrats were so scared of having Matt on the ballot that they put the full force of their organization and the most powerful attorney and the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, which I believe is run by Chuck Schumer. I mean, the most powerful forces of the Democratic Party wanted to stop Matt from being on the ballot. And they weren't able to do it. They weren't able to stop this. And they weren't able to stop the will of the people. What they were able to do was delay a lot that this campaign needed to be doing to make sure that Matt Ho is a household name in North Carolina, and to put him in the US Senate, where he can fight for things like RCV and proportional representation. And so we really need other people who can step up to the plate and be a hero for this campaign. And so I am asking people, you know, if you can match that 1,000 that Vicky has pledged to us, please do, because we need what you can give. And if you have it, this is the place to give it, because this is where it's going to make a difference. So I'm hoping that people can give. And if you can't do big money because you don't have it, and that is something I understand, because I don't have it. So I know that it's not something everyone could do, but if you could do 500 tonight, 500 would make a massive difference for this campaign. If anyone here would be able to give $500, you know, that is something that would put us in a position, because we want to get the word out everywhere. And we've got some exciting plans. We have billboards planned. We have, you know, Gail Gorleski, who is one of our regional organizers, is looking up having a plane fly a banner and, you know, just get Matt's name out there and what he stands for. So if people could do $100 tonight, $100, you know, we still have 42 people here. So I know some people have dropped off of our attendees, and I understand it's been a long, you know, it's been a long discussion. It's been a great discussion. And like I said, we have like 30 questions. I wish I could ask them all, because, you know, this is a really lively discussion, but it can make a big difference if some of you could do just $100 tonight.
And it does. You know, I mean, like, one of the things we're up against here is getting ourselves known, people understanding who we are, what we represent, getting out there and listening to people. You know, one of the core goals for us this next 10 weeks, as we have about left in the for the campaign. And, you know, I mean, one of the things that happened with these lawsuits, being in federal court and state court, fighting the state board of elections, fighting, you know, these multiple Goliaths like we did over the summer, it took a couple of months away from our campaign. So we're only now doing the campaign things we wanted to be doing back in June when we first submitted to be on the ballot. Look, we submitted our signatures on May 17th to be certified. We weren't certified and on the ballot until August 11th. They took almost 3 months away from us of campaigning. You know, so we are excited, and we are really the enthusiasm we have to get this done, to get out there and campaign. And so, but we need the support to do it, in order to get out to the people, to be a part of festivals, to be out, have our people out, engaging people on the street, engaging people at concerts, engaging where the people are at. Because in order for us to reach as many as the 7.3 million registered voters in the state, we need to be where the people are. And then, as Rose also intimated, we have to as well be advertising, right? So it's the billboard billboards, it's the videos, it's the Facebook ads, it's the YouTube ads, getting people to know who we are, letting people know they have another option, letting people know there is an alternative that represents them, and to be speaking about the issues. This is one of the very most cogent and sincere points of this campaign, is to make sure that the issues that we represent are spoken about, because they're not going to be otherwise. They're not going to be otherwise. Rents went up 50% in North Carolina last year. Year on year in August, rents are up 50% over what they were a year before. That's according to rent.com. 50%. No one in the US Senate race but this campaign has been talking about that. No one has, and no one will. The same thing with healthcare, with jobs, with the war on drugs. We have 12 opioid overdose deaths a day in this state. Right. We just had the life expectancy numbers. U.S. life expectancy dropped again. And if God help you, if you're a Native American, if you're one of our indigenous brothers and sisters, because those people, our brothers and sisters, or our Native brothers and sisters, they have seen a life expectancy drop of 6.6 years over the last, of 6.6 years in the last 3 years. I mean, that's unheard of. That's 18th century type of stuff. So what we are representing, who we are representing, if we're not out there, no one is going to be mentioning those things. No one's going to be talking about it. It'll be ignored, and it will just be the continuation of this deadly status quo. So your help is what we need in order to represent those who otherwise aren't going to be represented.
Yes, and I see Janet Nagel, who's been a great supporter of this campaign in North Carolina, has just given $27. And I know that was a popular amount with Bernie Sanders' campaign. And Bernie Sanders' fundraising among small donors was really something that every progressive should be looking at, that and how much you can do when people step up. And that's why Bernie Sanders kept putting out a message that was not one of that was necessarily approved of by the corporate wing of the Democratic Party, such as Medicare for all and free education. So, all right, William Simon, $100. Thank you. Anyone else who could do 100, who could do 50, who could do 25, 27. I like that 27 number. Like I said, it was popular with Bernie. If you could do $10, I have said this at other events where, when I ask people, if you could do $2,900, could you be a hero and do that 2,900? Could you be a hero and do 1,500, 1,000? I also like to point out that if you are trying to change the system, if you are trying to make a better world, if you are trying to put men like Matthew Ho into office so that they could shake up this deadly status quo establishment, then you are my hero. So you all are. And so, Carol, thank you for the 10. Again, it all makes a difference. So I want to thank you all for being here. And I just want to turn the floor over to Howie to make some closing remarks, and then to Matt. And from there, we will see you all at our next webinar. And Howie, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's been very informative, as always.
Well, I've enjoyed being here. Thanks for having me. When I was thinking about running for president, the word got back to Bill McKibben, who took to the pages of the New Yorker to say, don't run for president, work for ranked choice voting. Now, I've been working before, during, and after that presidential race, and I haven't heard a word about it since from Bill McKibben, who has gone out of his way to attack the Green Party in this country. He says he likes Greens in Europe, but not here because of our electoral system. So that to me means, we Greens got to lead on this issue. We need to lead on the pro-democracy reforms. We know the Republicans, they're suppressing the vote. They're trying to set it up to steal elections by getting control of the election machinery in states they control. And the Democrats, like authoritarian governments, suppress their opposition, their political opposition, the Green Party. So we're the ones that really got to fight for democracy in this democracy crisis we have. And, you know, when I did run for president, I had 3 themes: Green New Deal for the climate, economic Bill of Rights for the people, and peace policies, particularly to deal with this escalating new nuclear arms race. If I was to run again, I'd have a 4th theme. You got to keep it narrow. There's so many issues, but the 4th would be these pro-democracy reforms for an inclusive multi-party democracy, fair ballot access, ranked choice voting for the executive offices, and proportional ranked choice voting for the legislative offices. For the Green Party, that's really what we need so that the popular support for our issues, and you look at the polls, what we're proposing in many respects are majoritarian positions, but the majority public opinion doesn't translate into public policy because of all these anti-majoritarian features in our electoral system. You know, obviously the Senate, obviously electoral college, but also, which people aren't paying enough attention to, the exclusive nature of single member district winner take all elections, which magnifies majorities or pluralities into overwhelming majorities and underrepresents grossly political minorities. So the Greens got to carry this banner, and I'm glad Matthew is. And I urge all other Green candidates out there to make it a top priority, because I think this is essential to saving our democracy. So thanks for having me, and I was glad to be here.
Thank you, Howie.
Yeah, one of the things, this week, I was reading about was in California, and Governor Newsom vetoed legislation that would have made it easier for farm workers to vote. And so it's very clear that the 2 major corporate parties, will not only abandon, but will suppress whoever they think is a threat to them. So of course, obviously, and what's attendant to that is the fact that Gavin Newsom just bought a huge huge vineyard. You know what I mean? So that's parallel to this, as he's suppressing farm workers' ability to vote. These people had just done a 300-mile march for their voting rights, and Newsom just, and this is in the blue state of California where the Democrats control. We see that over and over again, right? So it is up to us to do this. So I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Thank everyone for the support. You're the ones who've gotten us to this point. All the people in our campaign, the North Carolina Green Party, all the folks who made our ballot access possible. And then tonight, people like Vicky and Terrence and Bill and Janet and Gloria, Carol and Franz, thank you for your donations, and thank you everyone for your continued belief in this campaign. We are going to be in Asheville this weekend at the Goombay Festival. Please join us if you can. And then on Monday, we are going to be marching in the Charlotte Labor Day Parade. So if you're in Charlotte, please come march with us. And then, every week from here on election, we're going to have a variety of events. We're going to be out doing things. So if you're here in North Carolina, you can join us. Please do so. We'll be putting it up on our website, putting it on social media where we'll be. One thing that makes this campaign different than the Ted Budd and Sherry Beasley campaigns, my Republican and Democratic opponents, as well as the Libertarian opponent, Shannon Bray, is that we are very public. We're very accessible. We want people to come and talk to us. I want to listen to people. I want to meet people. Sherry Beasley or Ted Budd could be in your town. You don't know about it until the day after because they never publicize it, because they only want to talk to an audience that they control, and that's certainly not who we are. So thank you all so much for your support. I also want to put a plug in for my Green Party colleagues who are on the ballot here in North Carolina. If you're able to support Michael Trudeau, who's running for State Senate 16, please do so. And Josh Bradley, who's running for an at-large seat with the Raleigh City Council. So it's Bradley for Raleigh workers. Please support Josh and Michael as well, because I can't think of 2 better people to be in the Raleigh City Council and in the North Carolina State Legislature other than Josh and Michael. But thank you all for tonight. Thank you, Howie, for joining us. Rose, everybody on the back end here. You all have a good night.
I'll be seeing you in person tomorrow.
Right. Yeah, Nashville.
At the Goombay Festival in Asheville. I'm in North Carolina right now. So I hope anyone in the Asheville area comes on out. You'll get to meet Matt, and I'll be around, and Gail, and other Greens and campaign supporters in Asheville will be there. So really looking forward to that.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Howie.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Good night, all.